It's Gary Parrish here to play 5 questions on the Tigers with CJ Hurt. CJ, once again, is in charge of the questions. For better or worse, I'm in charge of the answers. Let's get into it with question number 1.
All right, Gary, question number 1. What is the main takeaway from the Tigers' loss to Houston over the weekend?
Yeah, it was another close loss, competitive game against what is literally the best team in the country. And I think that's the main takeaway, that, you know, over several months now, we've learned, I think, that Memphis can play with anybody in the country. They've shown it over and over and over again. It's not the most talented Memphis team we've ever seen. It's not the most talented Penny Hardaway team we've ever seen. But it is a good college basketball team capable of playing with literally anybody in the country. They've now played Houston tough twice, home and away. They played a 1-possession game at Alabama. You know, those are 3 competitive games with teams that are projected to be number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. As far as the wins, they've beaten a Texas A&M team that finished 2nd in the SEC, beat a Vanderbilt team that's beaten Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Pitt. Beat an Auburn team that's beaten Northwestern, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee. Beat a Nebraska team that's beaten Creighton, Iowa, Maryland, and Rutgers. Beat a VCU team that won the Atlantic 10 regular season title by 3 games. It's a good college basketball team that is easy to root for, and that was on display once again this weekend inside FedEx Forum. I know Memphis fans left the building disappointed, but I think Memphis fans also left with an appreciation for this team that Penny Hardaway has assembled.
Question number 2. Did Jamal Shead push off on that buzzer beater?
He clearly pushed off. Like, there's no way to even get around it. Like, you don't need a high-definition, slow-motion replay to recognize that he used his left arm to create space by pushing Elijah McCadden away from him. If you take it to any sort of official and just say letter of the law, is that an offensive foul or not? I think they will all tell you absolutely, letter of the law, that's an offensive foul. Once Jamal Shead uses that left arm to create space, that should be a whistle, and we're going the other way. That said, in that moment, the truth is that's just not called that often. You can go all the way back to Jordan Game 6, where he so clearly pushed off to create space. It wasn't called then, and more often than not, in all of the years since, that type of play is not whistled as an offensive foul in the closing seconds of a tight game. Should it be? I guess we could have a conversation about that. But I wasn't surprised that the whistle wasn't blown, although, again, if you're teaching in referee school, whether that's an offensive foul or not, it quite clearly was an offensive foul.
All right, the Tigers suffer a 2-point loss to Houston, another close loss for the Tigers. Are these losses cause for concern?
I don't know that they're cause for concern. I would tend to look at it from the other direction and say, yeah, it's another close loss to Houston. But, boy, they were in a close loss, in a close game with a team that is ranked number 1 in the net, number 1 at KenPom, number 1 in my top 25 and 1, number 1 in the AP poll, basically number 1 in every relevant computer that gets referenced. So I don't know that it's a cause for concern, but it is noticeable, and it's wild to think about. 5 of Memphis's 8 losses this season are by 3 points or less. 2 of them are overtime losses. 3 of them are buzzer-beating losses. Like, this team is super close to being something like 26-5 instead of 23-8. You just get a stop here, make a shot there, and we're not even talking about whether they're in the NCAA tournament or not. It's so crystal clear that they are. But it's not like they did really anything in the closing seconds of the Houston game this weekend to put themselves in a bad situation. In fact, the opposite is true. They did good things in the closing seconds to put themselves in a position to maybe win the game. Go back to the Seton Hall buzzer beater that they lost on. They screwed that up. They gave that away. I didn't get the sense that they gave this one away. They just got beat, frankly, by a better team because a young man who's a tremendous college basketball player, pushed off, didn't get a whistle, but also buried a really tough shot under the circumstances. I'm not concerned with the way the final seconds played out in that Memphis game. In fact, I would I would come away from it being more encouraged that Memphis once again found itself in a gettable game with one of the best teams in the country.
Did Kendrick Davis do enough in that game to win the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year?
I think I would vote for him. Now, I'm not sure that he'll win it. The argument for somebody else would be Marcus Sasser at Houston, and that would be the classic best player on best team because he is the best player and Houston is the best team. But it is true that Kendrick Davis is averaging 21.5 points per game, 5.6 assists, 3.7 rebounds per contest. He is better in all of those categories than Marcus Sasser. Now, Marcus Sasser has a better field goal percentage, better three-point percentage. If you go by the KenPom Player of the Year algorithm, it leans toward Marcus Sasser instead of Kendrick Davis. But I think I would cast my ballot for Kendrick Davis and make him a two-time, 2 years in a row, American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. And I would tie it to this. Statistically, he's been better this season. I think he's just had a better season than Marcus Sasser. But beyond that, we know that Houston would be good without Marcus Sasser. They were last year. They went to the Elite Eight without Marcus Sasser. They're great with him. They're really good without him. I don't think Memphis would be any good without Kendrick Davis. I don't think Memphis would be sniffing the NCAA tournament without Kendrick Davis. So not only is he statistically better this season than Marcus Sasser, I think he's frankly more important to his team than Marcus Sasser has been to his team. And if Memphis were headed to the NIT or finished fourth in the AAC, I wouldn't have this under consideration. But given that Memphis is clearly the second best team in the AAC, played the best team competitively twice, and is, I assume, headed to the NCAA tournament for the second straight year, my vote would go Kendrick Davis, AAC Player of the Year.
Last question, Gary. Are the Tigers now a lock to make the tournament?
I don't know that they're a lock, but I would bet everything I own that they will be in the NCAA tournament. Because right now, Jerry Palm has them projected as a number 10 seed. So that means they have a little bit of wiggle room if things go badly in the AAC tournament. From a resume perspective, Memphis is now 10-7 in the first two quadrants with only one loss outside of the first two quadrants. They've got quadrant one wins over Auburn and Texas A&M. The one Q3 loss is a buzzer beater loss to Tulane at home. So what we now know is Memphis is going to play UCF SMU, the winner of that game, in the quarterfinals of the AAC tournament. For the sake of the conversation, let's assume that it's UCF, because it probably will be. Even if the Tigers were to lose that first game in the tournament to UCF, it would just be a quadrant two loss. So Memphis would still be 10-8 in the first two quadrants with that one loss to Tulane coming outside of the first two quadrants. 2 games above 500 in the first two. I always think it's important to provide context. Look at the bottom of the bracket. So if you go to Jerry Palm's right now, the last at-large team Palm has is Michigan. Michigan right now is 5 games under 500 in the first two quadrants, and they have a quadrant 4 loss, which is worse than Memphis' quadrant 3 loss. In other words, a team that's 5 games under 500 in the first two quadrants is still in the field as of today, according to Jerry Palm. I just laid out the most reasonable worst-case scenario for Memphis is to enter Selection Sunday 2 games above 500 in the first two quadrants. So simply put, I just don't think you're going to be able to find 36 better at-large candidates on Selection Sunday than the resume that Memphis is going to be able to present to the selection committee. If they end up playing SMU in that first game and they take a quad 4 loss there, maybe we have to revisit this. But barring something really, really catastrophic like that, Penny Hardaway is going to be in the NCAA tournament for the second consecutive year.